Have you ever sat in silence, wondering why no one seems to truly care when you're breaking inside? Why your words, your cries, your pain seem to float through the air like they never landed? You speak, hoping someone will listen. You explain, hoping someone will understand. But all you get in return is silence, distance, or a hollow response. It hurts. It makes you question everything. And deep inside, you start to wonder, am I alone in this? But maybe the real question is this: are you looking for comfort in the right place? Are you pouring your heart out to people when you should be pouring it out to Allaah Almighty? Because the truth is, no one can carry your pain like He can. No one can calm your heart like He can. The people you run to, they're busy carrying their own pain. They're overwhelmed too. And while they might offer a moment of sympathy, it's fleeting, it fades. But the comfort that comes from Allaah Almighty, it stays, it heals. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever remains patient, Allaah Almighty will make him patient." Nobody can be given a blessing better and greater than patience. You see, every time you speak your problems into the world, hoping someone will fix them, you risk building your identity around your struggle. You begin to define yourself by what went wrong instead of what could go right. You wait for someone to validate you when you should be reminding yourself of who you truly are. You were not created to break. You were created to rise. But rising takes silence. It takes reflection. It takes surrender, not to people, but to Allaah Almighty. He tells us in the Quran, "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." Let that verse echo in your heart. Let it sink in. With your hardship, not after, not later, but with it comes ease. That means right now, even in the middle of your pain, the path to relief has already been placed. But you'll miss it if your eyes are fixed on people. You'll miss it if your heart is begging for comfort in conversations instead of in prayer. Your healing starts the moment you stop talking about the problem and start seeking the one who holds all the solutions. This isn't about pretending you're okay. This is about finding the strength to turn your silence into prayer, your confusion into clarity, your weakness into worship. There is power in quiet strength. There is power in the one who cries to Allaah Almighty at night, instead of complaining to people during the day. That is not weakness. That is maturity. That is leadership of the soul. So today, pause. Ask yourself, am I venting to be heard, or am I surrendering to be healed? One leads to more pain. The other leads to peace. Choose wisely. The world may never understand your heart, but Allaah Almighty already does. Do you ever catch yourself repeating the same complaint again and again? Maybe it's about someone who hurt you, or a dream that didn't come true, or the way life just feels stuck no matter what you do. You say it once, then again, then to someone else, then out loud to yourself. And without realizing it, your pain becomes your story, your identity, your lens. This is the trap we rarely talk about. Emotional repetition. Saying the same things. Rehearsing the same hurt. Replaying the same scenes, hoping that maybe this time someone will understand. But here's what actually happens. The more you speak from your wound, the more you live from it, and the harder it becomes to move forward. You begin to believe the narrative you keep repeating, not because it's true, but because your heart has heard it so often, it starts to accept it as reality. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Verily, the heart becomes rusty like iron, and the polish for it is the remembrance of Allaah Almighty." What does that mean? It means your heart was never meant to be weighed down with constant emotional repetition. It was meant to be renewed, cleansed, lifted. Not by more talking, but by more remembrance, by returning to Allaah Almighty. When you spend your energy rehearsing your pain instead of processing it, you stay stuck, you stay small, and you begin to shrink into a version of yourself defined not by your strength, but by your struggle. But you were not created for that. You were created to rise, not through endless conversations, but through meaningful transformation. The Quran tells us, "And whoever puts his trust in Allaah Almighty, He is sufficient for him." That's your escape from the trap. Trust, not talking. Surrender, not spiraling. You need to start asking yourself every time you feel the urge to repeat your story, is this helping me heal, or is this keeping me wounded? Because healing doesn't come from venting. It comes from shifting, from choosing to speak life instead of reliving pain, from choosing to say, yes, it hurt, but now I'm rebuilding. Yes, I'm tired, but I'm still trusting Allaah Almighty. What you speak begins to shape what you seek. If you keep saying, I'm broken, you'll look for proof that you are. But if you start saying, I'm healing, you'll begin to act like it. You'll begin to pray like it, move like it, believe like it. And that belief, it will change everything. Let me be clear. This is not about silence that suffocates. It's about silence that strengthens. It's about recognizing the difference between processing your emotions, which is healthy, and rehearsing your pain, which is harmful. One leads you closer to Allaah Almighty. The other leads you deeper into despair. You may be thinking, but I need to talk. I need to feel heard. And that's valid. But who are you talking to? Are you speaking to someone who will guide you back to faith, or someone who will just echo your fears? Are you seeking sympathy, or are you seeking a solution? When you vent to people who cannot guide you, you may feel validated, but you will not feel victorious. And your soul was created to overcome, not to settle in sorrow, not to camp in complaint, but to walk, even if slowly, toward healing, toward strength, toward Allaah Almighty. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "When Allaah Almighty loves a servant, He tests them. If they endure, He draws them closer." So, what if your pain is not a punishment but a path? What if it's not meant to be explained but experienced? So that you can grow into the person Allaah Almighty is preparing you to be. Stop giving your voice to the same story that keeps you stuck. Start giving your energy to the future you want to build, one prayer at a time, one silent surrender at a time. Today, choose a different kind of strength. The strength to break the pattern. The strength to hold your tongue when the urge to complain rises. The strength to whisper, "Oh, Allaah Almighty, you know. You see, you are enough for me." That is the language of growth. That is the sound of transformation. And that is where healing begins to take root. It's falling apart. No one else truly feels the same weight you do. They have their own silent storms, their own grief, regret, worry. You may think they are ignoring you, but they are simply overwhelmed themselves. And yet, we keep expecting. We keep handing over our emotional well-being, hoping someone else will protect it, hoping they'll check in, say the right thing, stay by our side, no matter how heavy we feel. But even the most compassionate friend cannot always show up. And when they don't, we call it betrayal. But what it really is human limitation. The Quran reminds us, "And rely upon Allaah Almighty, and sufficient is He as disposer of affairs." That is your answer. That is your direction when others fail you. And they will, not out of cruelty, but out of weakness, So you turn to the one who never fails, who never forgets, who never becomes tired of hearing your voice. Allaah Almighty is always present, always. This doesn't mean you must suffer in silence. It means you must adjust your compass. You must stop looking to people for what only Allaah Almighty can give: understanding, patience, guidance, peace. When you carry expectations into every connection, you begin to see people not as they are, but as you want them to be. You get angry when they don't check on you. You feel hurt when they don't respond. But here's what that really means. You've made your emotional state dependent on something outside of yourself. And that is not power. That is captivity. You were not created to live like that. You were created to rise above, to understand that true peace comes when you stop handing your heart to people who were never asking to hold it. It's time to take it back. Not in bitterness, not in coldness, but in wisdom, in clarity, in surrender. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever seeks to please people by displeasing Allaah Almighty, Allah will be displeased with him and make the people displeased with him too." That's a powerful warning and a reminder. Your mission is not to be understood by everyone. Your mission is to be sincere with Allaah Almighty, to seek His pleasure, to trust His wisdom, to know that when you are grounded in Him, the rest falls into place. So what should you do the next time someone fails to support you? You pause, you breathe, and you remember, their silence is not your undoing. Their absence is not your ruin, because you were never alone to begin with. Allaah Almighty has always been there. Turn to Him with your full weight. Lay down your sorrow in prayer, not in endless messages. Speak to the one who already knows. Cry to the one who already understands. And find relief in knowing you no longer need anyone to carry what was never theirs to hold. That is where peace begins. That is where your power returns. And that is how you walk forward, lighter, stronger, and finally free. Have you ever really listened to the words you speak about your life? When someone asks, "How are you doing?" do you say, "I'm just trying to survive"? Do you speak as if nothing ever works out for you? Do you find yourself saying, "I'm always tired. No one cares. Things never change"? These words may seem harmless, just passing thoughts, but they are shaping something deeper. Every sentence, your heart hears it, your mind records it, and over time you begin to believe it. That's the power of repetition. The more you say something, the more you embody it. And before you know it, you're no longer just going through a struggle. You become the struggle. Not because that's who you truly are, but because that's who you've spoken yourself into being. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever believes in Allaah Almighty and the last day should speak good or remain silent." This isn't just about manners. This is about protecting your soul from the poison of negative language. Because your tongue doesn't just describe your reality, it creates it. And that's why so many people stay stuck. Not because they lack strength, but because they keep reinforcing the wrong narrative. They keep watering the wrong identity, the one built on hopelessness, on pain, on fear. But here's what you need to know. You can break that pattern. You can choose a new story. One that says, "Yes, life is hard, but my Lord is greater." One that says, "I'm still hurting, but I am healing." One that says, "I don't have it all figured out, but I trust Allaah Almighty to guide me." The Quran tells us, "Do not despair of the mercy of Allaah Almighty. Indeed, Allaah Almighty forgives all sins." Now imagine if you spoke from that place, from mercy, from hope. Imagine if your words were rooted in faith instead of frustration. Imagine how your energy would shift, how your relationships would feel different, how your own reflection in the mirror would begin to change. This isn't about denying your pain. It's about not making it your personality. It's about knowing that your value is not defined by how heavy life feels right now. Your value is in the strength Allaah Almighty has already placed inside you, and how you choose to speak from it. So let's start being intentional. Let's stop calling ourselves broken and start calling ourselves believers. Let's stop repeating what went wrong and start speaking what's still possible. Let's start replacing words like "I can't" with "Allaah Almighty is with me." Replacing "nothing ever works" with "maybe Allaah Almighty is redirecting me to something better." Because those words are not just hopeful, they are powerful. They remind you, you are not a victim of your circumstances. You are a servant of Allaah Almighty, and with Him, even the most shattered pieces can be turned into something beautiful. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "A good word is like a good tree, whose root is firm and whose branches reach the sky." Your words can be that tree, something that stands tall, that gives shade to others, that grows even in hard soil, but only if you plant the right seeds. So what are you saying to yourself every day? Are your words lifting you or limiting you? Are you speaking from fear or from faith? Remember, people may forget, but Allaah Almighty never does. What you say, but your heart never does. Every complaint, every whisper of self-doubt, every sentence of defeat, it gets recorded. It becomes part of your internal script, and that script becomes the life you live. So let's rewrite it. Let's build a vocabulary of strength. Let's speak like people who trust their Lord, like people who know they are being held, guided, and prepared, even when life feels uncertain. The next time you feel like saying, "I can't handle this," pause. Say instead, "I don't know how, but Allaah Almighty will make a way." The next time you feel like saying, "I'm lost," try, "I'm being redirected." And when your mind says, "I'm finished," remind yourself, Allaah Almighty is just getting me started. This is the language of the soul. This is how you protect your heart. This is how you break free from a narrative that never belonged to you in the first place. Because you were never weak. You were never broken. You were simply in a chapter of your story that needed more faith, not more fear, more remembrance, not more ranting. So speak like someone who believes. Speak like someone who trusts Allaah Almighty, not just with their problems, but with their future. And watch how your life begins to reflect what your words have been brave enough to believe. Have you ever felt the urge to talk? Not because it helps, but because the silence feels too heavy to sit with. You reach for your phone. You open a chat. You start typing a long message. Not because you've discovered something new, but because the weight of what you're feeling is too much to carry alone. You think, maybe if I say it, it will make it better. But then you send it, and there's no reply. Or maybe a reply comes, but it doesn't land where you needed it to. You still feel unheard, unseen, unhealed, and a quiet voice inside you wonders, did I just pour my soul into the wrong space? We live in a world that glorifies sharing, that celebrates openness, that tells us to speak everything we feel. But sometimes, silence is more powerful than speech. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of surrender. The silence that says, I am not okay, but I am not running to people anymore. I am sitting with this. I am listening for what Allah Almighty wants me to hear. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, whoever remains silent has been saved. Because silence forces you to face what your words often try to escape. It strips away distractions. It teaches you to listen, not to the world, but to your heart, to your Lord, to the quiet guidance that can only be heard when everything else fades. The Quran tells us, indeed, in the remembrance of Allah Almighty, do hearts find rest. Notice, it doesn't say in speaking, or in explaining, or in being understood. It says in remembrance, because peace doesn't come from being heard by others. It comes from being present with Allah Almighty, in that sacred stillness, when it's just you, your thoughts, and your pain. You begin to notice what your soul has been trying to tell you. Maybe you've been running too fast. Maybe you've been ignoring a truth you didn't want to face. Maybe your heart has been aching, not for conversation, but for prayer, for connection, for healing that only silence can begin. You see, not all storms need to be spoken. Some need to be watched. Some need to be reflected on. Some need to pass through your chest in tears, in frustration, in silent whispers of, "Oh, Allah Almighty, I don't even have the words." But you know, and He does. Allah Almighty knows the emotions that never made it into sentences. He knows the pain that never left your heart. He sees what you buried, what you tried to explain but couldn't. And He never requires that you speak to be seen. He is As-Sami, the all-hearing, even when you are silent. So the next time you feel the urge to vent, to write that message, to explain yourself one more time, pause. Ask yourself, will this bring me closer to peace, or just help me escape the silence for a moment? Because some of the most powerful healing happens in the quietest places, in your room after midnight. When you're too tired to speak, but too burdened to sleep. In those moments where your tears speak louder than your words, where you lie in stillness and let your soul rise to Allah Almighty without needing to explain anything. That kind of silence is sacred. It purifies, it strengthens, it matures you, it separates what's important from what's just noise. And it allows Allah Almighty to fill the space that people were never meant to fill. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught us the value of reflection, of seclusion, of stillness, not to isolate, but to elevate, to disconnect from the noise of the world so we can reconnect with the truth of our soul. You don't need to post every breakdown. You don't need to share every pain. Sometimes, the most beautiful strength is the one no one sees, the one that develops in secret, that grows in the soil of silence, and blooms into a strength that speaks without sound. Let people be curious. Let the world wonder how you're still standing. You don't owe anyone your breakdown, but you owe your Lord, your attention, your stillness, your presence, your trust. So the next time the heaviness returns, instead of reaching out, reach inward. Instead of explaining, start remembering. Instead of posting, start praying. And in that moment, you'll find a kind of peace that no conversation could ever give you. A peace that doesn't come from being heard, but from being held by the one who has always been listening. To be narrated, it needs to be lived. The Prophet Muhammad said, "From the perfection of a person's Islam is leaving that which does not concern him." This hadith is not just about avoiding gossip. It's a call to self-respect, to stop wasting your energy proving things to people who aren't part of your healing. It's about learning to walk quietly, with purpose, with strength that does not scream, with dignity that does not demand approval. And that is not weakness, that is wisdom. We live in a world that pushes you to share, to speak, to justify. But when you start walking with Allaah Almighty, your priorities shift. You stop trying to be understood by people, and you start trying to be sincere with your Lord. The Quran reminds us, indeed, Allah is with those who fear Him, and those who are doers of good. That's who you're trying to be. Not someone endlessly explaining, but someone quietly rising. Someone who knows the one who matters most already knows your heart, already sees your effort, already understands the battles you fight in silence. And that is enough. You don't need to update anyone on your healing. You don't need to prove that you're trying. Let your life speak. Let your actions narrate your comeback. Let your eyes shine with the strength that only comes from brokenness handed to Allah Almighty. You will be misunderstood. That's a part of life. But you don't need to chase clarity from people who don't have the capacity to give it. Some will reduce your growth to pride, your silence to distance, your strength to coldness. Let them. Because the truth is, your journey is not theirs to understand. It's between you and the one who wrote your story in the first place, and his opinion is the only one that counts. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Whoever seeks Allah's pleasure, even if it displeases the people, Allah will be pleased with him, and will make the people pleased with him too." So keep going, keep healing, keep growing. You don't need to post it. You don't need to explain it. You just need to live it. And here's the most beautiful part. When you stop trying to be seen and simply focus on being sincere, Allah Almighty places a light in your presence that no words could ever create. People may not know your pain, but they will feel your peace. They will see something in you that speaks of healing, of quiet strength, of inner conviction. That's the power of a life anchored in sincerity. So walk like someone who knows their worth. Sit in rooms like someone who does not need to prove their healing. Show up like someone who has been rebuilt by Allah Almighty Himself. And when people ask, "How did you do it?" smile. Not because they finally noticed, but because you know it was never about them. It was always about you and Allah Almighty. You're not rising to impress. You're rising to obey. You're rising because staying down was never written for you. You're rising with every prayer, every step, every silent choice to choose faith over fear. Let your rise be quiet, but let your presence be undeniable. Let your growth speak so loudly it needs no explanation. Because when Allah Almighty lifts someone, He does it in ways no person can block, no gossip can ruin, no misunderstanding can stain. That's the kind of rise you're walking toward. And you're doing it in silence, with grace, with conviction, and with complete trust in the one who sees it all. There comes a point in every journey when you have to choose. Will I keep living from the wounds of my past? Or will I start creating a new story with the hope of my future? You may have carried pain for years. You may have cried over things no one ever knew about. You may have been broken so deeply that you started believing, maybe this is just who I am now. Broken, but it's not true. You are not your trauma. You are not your setbacks. You are not your silent suffering. You are a servant of Allah Almighty. And that means, no matter how low life has taken you, there is always a higher path waiting. A path back to peace, to healing, to purpose. The Quran reminds us, Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. That means every hardship you faced, Every moment you thought would crush you, every delay, every rejection, was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to awaken you, to prepare you, to lead you back to the one who never left. Start with one prayer, one verse, one sincere whisper in the night. Say, "Oh Allah Almighty, I've been lost, but I want to find my way back. Help me." That is enough. That is powerful. That is where transformation begins. You don't need a perfect past to walk into a beautiful future. You just need faith. Faith that your pain was not in vain. Faith that your story is not finished. Faith that Allah Almighty is not done with you. And once you start walking that path, everything begins to change. Your words, your thoughts, your habits, your goals. You stop looking for pity and start living with purpose. You stop asking for validation and start trusting the one who created you. Let today be the chapter where everything turns. Not because life suddenly gets easier, but because you finally decided to let go of the story of your pain and write the story of your rise. A rise not built on noise, but on sincerity, on prayer, on trust, on the unshakable belief that Allah Almighty never wastes a single tear. And when you walk with Him, your story does not end in sorrow. It ends in peace.